Thank you for joining us for today's session. I'm your host, Susan Hibbard with the BUILD Initiative. We'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement from Giovanna Archuleta, the Assistant Secretary for the New Mexico Early Childhood Education and Care Department.
I would like to open up this meeting acknowledging our Mother Earth and the land she nurtures us with, the land where our children grow, and the land that provides the food to feed them. When we talk about these resources, we must also acknowledge the lands of our tribal people and the deep spiritual and long-standing relationship of all tribal nations. Today I come from you from Nambe, the land of my ancestors who cared for it and fought for it so that I may one day live and raise my own children on it. A relationship that predates colonial contact by thousands of years. Our ancestors still speak to us and guide us through our songs, ceremonies, and writings. Through removal, trail of tears, long walks, assimilation, and the idea that by removing children would kill a culture. Our ancestors did not give up. Our tribal people are some of the most resilient people in our country, continuing to raise children to be resilient, who are nurtured through language and culture, the language and culture that cannot be removed. We must also acknowledge all other spirits who were forcefully displaced from their homelands and trafficked for labor and production on sacred native land. All of us collectively continue to experience the adversity that caused our ancestors and spirits who continue to hurt from actions done to them. Take a moment to pray these people find the healing and peace to raise their children in a world that has so many opportunities, but most importantly, create coexistence free of violence. Tribal people are praying people. This is where we are all tied. Our grandmothers and mothers continue to pray over us. And as tribal people pray, they pray for people in the north, in the east, in the south, and the west. They pray for infants, children, adults, and elders, and our non-human relations, each with knowledge to share with us. As this conference begins, I hope that each of you are balanced in all directions and take a moment to appreciate what Mother Earth has given to us and how she continues to nurture us in many ways. I invite and encourage you to learn who are the original stewards of the land you live and work on and support those nations and children of those lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanna. The BUILD team is excited to present this 20 webinars in 20 days for QRIS 2020 as we explore ideas, possibilities, and learn together about how we might recreate better, more equitable systems with children, families, and early childhood professionals at the center of our efforts. We're grateful to the many individuals who took time to prepare sessions, generate content, and ideas to share. We hope the sessions will inspire you to build on those ideas, continue conversations, and innovate back in your communities and states. We've learned a great deal as we prepared for the virtual events. One of our lessons is that a virtual event draws a much broader audience than an in-person conference. The BUILD QRIS conference was designed for early childhood systems leaders at the national, state, territory, tribal nation, and community levels. But as registrations rolled in for the virtual events, we discovered many direct service providers, from teachers to center directors and home-based providers signing up for the sessions. We welcome you to the learning community and look forward to hearing your perspective. We encourage all of you to share your comments, ideas, and questions in the chat box. As you know, we had to pivot from our in-person meeting to a virtual conference. We'd like to say a sincere thank you to our sponsors who made that switch possible. Their support is essential to this event. We've all become familiar with Zoom over the past several months as we've used it to connect with our friends, our family, community, and colleagues. But we want to point out a few features that might be new to you. First, when the PowerPoint isn't showing, you can choose your view. In the upper right-hand corner, click on Speaker View just to see the active speaker, or click on Gallery View to see everyone. Next, we really encourage you to provide feedback throughout the session by clicking Participants to open the participant list, and then clicking on the icons at the bottom to respond to questions or give us a thumbs up. Presenters may also use this feature to do some quick polling, so be ready. On this webinar today, we'll be doing polling in the chat box. And we'd love you to chat with us. We encourage you to be active participants in this session. Share your ideas, experiences, and questions in the chat box. Your participation really enhances the learning together, so we urge you to do it. And now I'd like to turn it over to Amaya Garcia to introduce our presenters and launch this great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am eager for you to hear from the 4 wonderful experts and practitioners who are focused on improving the education and experiences of dual language learners and their families in California. I'm joined by Dr. Elvira Armas, who is the Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Center for Equity for English Learners and affiliate faculty at Loyola Marymount University. I'm also joined by Thena Gee, who is an early learning coach at EduCare Silicon Valley and also with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Dr. Anya Hurwitz is also joining us today, and she is the Executive Director of SEAL. And finally, we are joined by Dr. Carola Oliva-Olson, who is Associate Professor in Early Childhood Studies in the School of Education at California State University, Channel Islands. My name is Amaya Garcia, and I will be moderating today's presentation. I work in the Education Policy Program at New America in Washington, D.C., where my work primarily focuses on the education of English learners. Each presenter will have a chance to tell you more about themselves and their work, but before introductions, I would like to give some framing and go through the terms we will be using in today's webinar. Our discussion today will provide an overview of how California is helping to lead the way in teacher professional development for working effectively with dual language learners through a discussion of the following topics: the context of California to sort of set the stage for why this work is happening, looking at investments and partnerships to advance professional development in the state, looking at specific strategies for working with dual language learners, and given the recent situation we find ourselves in, how to support dual language learners through distance learning. So in thinking about the terms that we're going to be using, we use the term dual language learner to mean a child between the ages of birth and 8 years old who is in the process of learning English in addition to his or her home language. These children may or may not be formally considered English learners by their schools, depending on their performance on the state's English language proficiency assessment. So that means we are not focusing on children who are in a dual language education program. Rather, we are focusing on children who are growing up learning 2 languages. And then when we talk about English learners, we mean students between the grades of pre-K through 12th grade, whose home language is a language other than English, and whose proficiency in reading, writing, or understanding English is not yet sufficient to meet state expectations on assessments, to achieve in the classroom, and to fully participate in the school setting. So next, I would like to introduce the speakers and give them some time to talk more about themselves. So we will start with Elvira Armas.
It's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed panel. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Edvita Atmas. I currently serve as a Director of Programs and Partnerships at Loyola Marymount University's Center for Equity for English Learners. And I've had the privilege of working alongside educators for 32 years now in multiple capacities, including as a bilingual classroom teacher, as the coach, as a director at the university level, and also as an instructional materials developer. Our center, founded in 2006, is located in Los Angeles, California, and we've partnered with over 65 county offices of education, districts, schools, institutes of higher education, and advocacy organization. Our center's research, policy, and professional development agendas inform leadership and instructional practices for California's 1.1 million dual language and English language learners, as well as the nation's English learners. Given our focus on positively affecting culturally and linguistically diverse students' achievement, social and emotional well-being, and engagements, our theory of action focuses on leveraging cross-disciplinary collaboration, partnerships, and policy engagement, as well as research and inquiry. On the next slide, you'll see our areas of focus. These include research and evaluation, collaboration and partnerships, professional learning, and policy and advocacy. We engage in dynamic partnerships to co-construct research and evaluation efforts that can inform policy and advocacy. Our professional learning offerings support pre-service and in-service educators, and we are committed to providing online open access resources and modules. I pass this along to my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I am Thena Gee, and I'm a mentor coach with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And I provide ongoing support and development for teachers at EduCare of Silicon Valley. So EduCare California of Silicon Valley is an early learning center that narrows the opportunity gap for families with children who are from birth through 5 years old. And so we follow the EduCare core features, which are data utilization, embedded professional development, high quality teaching practice, and intensive family engagement. So at EduCare, we have 12 classrooms. We we're about 46 educators and support staff, and we have a capacity to serve 185 children. So as you can see in this slide, that we have over 85% of children who are dual language learners. And at the same time, we also noticed that most of our teachers are also dual language learners as well.
I'm Carola Oliva-Olson, and I'm delighted to join you all today and wish everyone good health, safety, and well-being during these challenging times. My role with working with Thena and the entire wonderful educators and leadership team at EduCare was as a lead consultant for the last 3-4 years. And the work that was quite unique that started then was to look at all of the systems and services and how they impacted family engagement practices and instructional supports to ensure equity and that all children, infants, toddlers, and preschoolers had full access to the learning experiences that are age specific and are not funneled and by the level of English proficiency, meaning that we're not waiting for children to have enough English language skills to be able to participate, but to have full access and effective participation in the daily experiences, and in extending the work to include families as reciprocal engagement throughout the programmatic areas. So as you can see in this poster, there are lots of activities that happened during these years in working with the administrators and to look at how ready all of the programmatic areas and activities were to serve children who are dual language learners and their families. So what is the experience of a family enrolling in the program? Home visits, family partnership agreements, professional development, parent conferences, and so on. So throughout these years, we looked at those and then started working on the areas that needed more support, enhancement, and worked with classroom-specific coaching, as well as professional development for the entire agency. And before I let Thena continue on in the details, another area that we worked on was coursework that we'll share more on, that became part of the state higher education platform to continue their foundational knowledge on how to support children who are dual language learners and their families, but while receiving upper division units from a state university. So all of the teachers and including providers from the community were able to participate and gain the foundational knowledge to continue this journey.
Yeah, thank you, Carola. Yeah, and Carola came to us as a lead instructor to provide ongoing support with PDs. And we're also so lucky to be able to be funded by the Heising-Simons Foundation and the Packer Foundation. So some of the activities that you see here in the middle section is that we had coaching the coaches. We visited the Fresno Language Project, which we learned immensely from. And then we also started to implement the personalized oral language learning strategies. And at the same time, our leadership team went through a self-assessment process, which is part of the overall strategy. We assessed everything that touches a family so that we could ensure that it is culturally and linguistically friendly. And then in the next slide, Carola.
So the work that we did together with coaching and with all educators was guided through this self-reflection that includes all of the supports to ensure that full access and effective participation for all children in the program. So this self-reflection allowed us to look at what are the family supports that are in place, how to build that knowledge, and how to then implement and ensure that educators had full understanding, but were able to implement and feel comfortable with those practices. Then the next section was working around environmental supports and looking at where we are in the process as the years go by and how to get more comfortable in implementing the strategies and ensuring the practices are all in place as a cohesive model. This is not a methodology that we're following. We're utilizing the POL strategies, the personalized oral languages strategies, to ensure that all of the learning, whatever methodology or curriculum they're using, the experiences are available for children to continue developing the cognitive skills, language, and all other skills that are intended to through those activities. So the last section is on instructional supports, looking at the pedagogical adaptations and enhancements, looking at effective oral language exchanges and interactions, and assessment practices.
So right now we're going to think a little bit about the context in California. So about 20% of K-12 students in California are English learners, and over 60% of young children in the state are considered dual language learners. These children are engaged in a variety of early learning experiences, and it is important that all early educators in the state are prepared with the skills and knowledge necessary to effectively serve these students. So I'd like to ask Carola to talk to us a little bit about the early education workforce in California. What do we know about who is teaching the young children in the state and what some of their professional learning needs are?
Thank you, Amaya. So as Amaya had mentioned, the majority of the children in California, birth to age 5, are dual language learners. So it means that they're learning in the context of 2 languages and with different and varying levels of experience with exposure to English. So in thinking about teacher preparation, there's been a lack of emphasis in building professional development and higher education coursework that prepares the necessary competencies for teachers and educators in general to be familiar with the learning and developmental continuum that children who are dual language learners are going through, and the kinds of supports that are needed so that they can benefit and reap the benefits of attending these programs as everybody else. So there's a momentum in California right now in implementing, in bringing up the quality of experiences in higher education programs, as well as professional development, to ensure that teachers have the opportunity to practice, to learn about, and to incorporate the necessary strategies.
Building on what Dr. Oliva-Olson shared in terms of this synergy that we're experiencing in California to be responsive to the need to prepare our workforce, we have several initiatives and policies that have been passed over the last few years to help us really identify and ground ourselves in potential policy shifts and hold ourselves accountable to markers of progress that will help us all work together to be able to better prepare our workforce in the early childhood education space. So what you see in front of you is a graphic that delineates 4 general areas, and I want to highlight some of the policies and recent initiatives in the state of California and invite you to visit those documents as a support, because we know we have representatives from across the nation. We hope to be able to highlight then some of the practices in enacting these policies and initiatives in working towards bettering our workforce. The first is in the area of pre-K through 3 alignment and coherence, and also bridging into ensuring that all of our policies and these alignments are based on research and evidence-based practices. The state of California passed an initiative introduced by our former state superintendent of instruction, Tom Torviksen, in 2018 titled Global California 2030. Boldly, we state and are committed to, by 2030, having 50% of our students participate in dual language programs. You heard the statistics, 60% of students in California below the age of 5 are dual language learners. We have an asset to build from and a vision to build towards. By 2030, by 2040, we're expecting that 75% of our students be proficient in 2 or more languages. California was the first state in the nation to offer the seal of biliteracy. Currently, 36 states plus Washington, D.C. are offering the state of biliteracy. We are committed to larger efforts to better prepare students for 21st century careers and college, recognizing that multilingualism is an essential skill. In 2016, 73.5% of voters approved Proposition 58. It's the California Multilingual Education Act. It allowed us as a state to eliminate obstructions for dual immersion programs and to really build on the assets that our dual language learners bring in early childhood settings to be able to give California school districts more control over offering and supporting dual language acquisition programs. In 2017, we passed a policy called the California English Learner Roadmap Policy. This policy strengthens comprehensive policies, programs, and practices for English learners and is an overall roadmap for pre-K through 12 systems. It's inclusive of dual language learners and insists on articulation within and across systems. The NASEM report at the national level, entitled Promoting the Educational Success of Children and Youth, Learning English report, produced by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, put forth affirmations of research that we should see in all of our programs and that help to build our alignment and coherence, stating that learning another language early in life may enhance cognitive benefits and academic outcomes, that dual language learner teachers can promote and should promote primary language maintenance while introducing English, and most importantly, that when dual language learners don't maintain their primary language proficiency, they're at danger of language loss and at risk of becoming estranged from their cultural and linguistic heritage. We also have several moves in policy. Our current Governor Newsom instituted an Early Childhood Policy Council comprised of multiple stakeholders as a model to be able to have input in the development of a statewide master plan for early learning and care by October of 2020. We have curriculum and program guides that have dedicated chapters written by leading experts in the field like Linda Espinosa and Marlene Cepeda to be able to support the efforts of educators who are committed to transforming the workforce. This is all meant to guide and support program quality and improvement. And as Dr. Oliva-Olson indicated, at the heart of program quality is teacher preparation. The state it plays an important role in shaping policy. We have California Early Childhood Educator Competencies. Invite you to visit those. They explicitly state knowledge, skills, and dispositions for early childhood educators and responding to dual language learners in order to promote young children's learning and development. And finally, as we visit through some of the initiatives that we'll highlight in our webinar, you'll hear about some of the funding sources that have been committed at the state level, such as the $5 million investment allocated in 2018 to allow for dual language learner professional development and current teacher preparation systems that explicitly address the development of knowledge, skills, and dispositions for early childhood educators.
Carola and Thena will now tell us a little bit more about the work that they have conducted through those professional development grants that Edvita just told us about. And then we'll be followed up with Anya Hurwitz telling us about how SEAL has utilized those grants as well.
So we were one of the grantees for the $5 million in the effort from California, from the California Department of Education in building capacity with the current early childhood workforce. What we did is we enhanced courses that we had at the university to ensure they were practice-based and responded to the need, which included professional development for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, serving preschoolers, and including educators from family, friends, and neighbor programs, center-based, family childcare provider homes, etc. And so these experiences were included professional development that were tied to education units that were transferable, upper division for an undergraduate degree. And they incorporated the POL strategies and build on a foundation of knowledge that included communities of practice. So looking at the rationale for why we're serving children who are dual language learners, including adaptations and enhancements. Why is assessment a critical and essential component? Trying in their own programs from different signature assignments that are part of the POL strategies, as well as developing a planned language approach, self-assessment for their programs, and engaging in discussions with their own site supervisors and directors. We initially created training for the instructors so we could build capacity across the state. And this is what you see with the instructor guide, and developing this in collaboration with the San Mateo County Office of Education. So the course The courses were focused on building knowledge and implementation so that there would be a strong emphasis on self-reflection. There was no cost for the participant. Tuition was free, and there was a stipend attached to completion, successful completion of the courses with strong participation and attendance. The books, the textbooks were also included, and we were able to provide children's books through funds with the Sobrato Foundation so that they could incorporate dialogic reading practices and learning how to engage in these scaffolded dialogic reading practices with children, but also with evidence-based dialogic practices with families. Most of the courses were offered online. Some were face-to-face or hybrid. So the design was created so that it would fit in all those contexts, but we eventually had to move to all online because of COVID. You'll see that the courses were divided in different topics that were addressed, from demographic trends for the students where they worked. So being able to understand the context in which they live and work, looking at understanding bilingual language development, understanding code switching, and how to engage in providing feedback to children without correcting them, looking at implementing family language and culture interviews, doing a child case study, self-reflection, looking at anti-bias, education, and as I mentioned earlier, child assessment and quality assessments that go beyond the use of quality tools such as class, but using supplements that fit and are able to describe the availability of the learning for children who are dual language learners. And then looking at what do we get from child language proficiency assessments? Why is this important? And including families also. The second course was looking at effective programming. So what does this look like when you're part of a program and you want to understand how your teaching fits within the scope of an agency, and the preparedness to serve children who are dual language learners and their families. Then looking at developing language plans or the planned language approach. What does that look like? Or when you already have one, if it needs to be refined, or in creating a formal plan that describes how you're going to use languages for instruction. So what are the models that fit? And then after all of this is laid out, it's presented to their supervisors so they can feel that they own this new knowledge that they've developed. The sessions that remain are all focused on the POL strategies and being able to implement them in their setting, taking photos that demonstrate the use of the POL strategies and the post. And in the communities of practice, they were able to learn from all the different contexts, because all the educators served different children, families, and worked in different programs and different counties. So it was very interesting and important to learn from each other, and how these strategies are not universal and are responsive to the needs of the children and families and educators who are working at that particular time together. So this is an example of the kind of literature that we used for the different languages, within the use of the poll strategies, and how they were able to work with this framework to look at the different activities that they had, the different curricula that guided their practice, but incorporating these set of cohesive strategies that allow the children who are dual language learners to participate, fully engage while they're developing comprehension and of English and expressive language skills. And this is the same, an example, but in preschool settings, once they have an approach in place on how they're using languages, the different languages for instruction, and how they're supporting the home language, whether the teachers speak the home, or the educators speak the home language of the children or not. So it's not dependent on their language background, but on the systematic implementation of the poll strategies to support each individual child who's a dual language learner. And this is done in intentional planned experiences, you know, that you see usually in a lesson plan, but also during spontaneous learning experiences, where we call it, right, the teachable moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, and what I appreciated being participant of the course was that it provided so many wonderful moments. Like Adele and I, our partner, we taught the first cohort in person and then the second cohort online. And being able to share this information with teachers, we have seen their awareness being expanded, and how they reevaluate their beliefs so that they can change the way they approach all students. Anya?
Hi, so my name is Anya Hurwitz, and I am the Executive Director of SEAL, Sobrato Early Academic Language, and I had technical difficulties when I was meant to introduce myself, but a little background about SEAL. SEAL stands for Sobrato Early Academic Language, and our mission is to prepare all English learners, dual language learners in California to learn, thrive, and lead. The goals of SEAL are mastery of rigorous 21st century standards and expectations, and access to the full curriculum, which we see as a civil rights issue and call. High levels of cognitive, language, and literacy skills, including biliteracy wherever feasible, with a deep, deep commitment to home language development, regardless of the language of the instruction. We want our children to be prepared for academic success in elementary school and preschool and beyond. So really on a trajectory of success. And then we focus on doing all of those key goals through building confident, motivated, engaged, and joyful learning experiences and learners. So the SEAL model was piloted in 3 elementary schools and their feeder preschools as originally a preschool through 3rd grade model. And we began piloting that back in 2008. And with very strong outcomes from an external evaluation, we began replication of the model in 2013, and we are now spread across over 120 elementary schools and over 120 preschool classrooms. And so the pillars of SEAL are really focused on the research-based, powerful, precise, expressive academic language across the curriculum, creating affirming and enriched environments, articulation across the grades, so students really experience, children experience an aligned and articulated learning across grade levels, and then a deep, strong partnership between families and schools. So our focus is really prioritizing the needs of young English learners, dual language learners, through a model of instruction that also serves all students. So we consider ourselves a comprehensive change approach. It's not a program or a time of day, and we focus on student achievement. We focus on teacher professional development and collaboration, the way that we are able to really impact that student achievement. We focus on family partnership, really this deep commitment and then the system, really thinking and approaching it from a systems perspective. So of course, that means working from the preschool systems into the elementary school systems, but also working with creating collaborative structures in schools and preschools so that we have a real systemic approach around enacting this research-based practice. And we also, when we look at outcomes, we look at student outcomes, of course, but we also see high impact in the SEAL model around teacher efficacy, teachers really feeling that they are able to enact research-based practice, as well as principals and district leaders, administrators also reporting high levels of implementation. They see their teachers implementing this research-based practice. So I'm going to share a little bit about so we were also a recipient along with Channel Islands that you just heard of this investment, this $5 million investment, state investment in educators that serve dual language learners. And through this important state investment, we were able to reach over 360 preschool educators. The grant funded 6 cohorts to receive what we call a deep dive training, about 30 teachers in each. And that happened over the course of many months. So they were really able to learn the key components of the SEAL model. And then in addition, we were able to do 4 additional groups that received a one-day institute and then followed up communities of practice that were actually locally facilitated. So really, again, we're always focused on a systems approach, and so building internal capacity. So those were locally facilitated. And we were able to serve educators in some new counties that we had never been able to implement SEAL before: Yolo County, Tulare County, San Bernardino, and then we were also be able to reach educators in LA County and Santa Clara County, where we already had some implementation happening. As you can see from this graphic, the core components of the training are supporting oral language, the critical role of oral language for all students and absolutely for dual language learners, affirming children's languages and cultures, engaging with text, and making things visible, tangible, and comprehensible. Within SEAL, we focus on deep, engaging learning experiences through thematic instruction. That allows the integration of language development with content. These elements around the petals are woven together to create really powerful preschool classrooms that support dual language learners. So really looking at science and integrating it with socio-emotional and math and joyful learning and children's voice and relationships, and focusing on social studies and community and play. So it's really in the weaving together of an integration that we see the most powerful classroom and learning environments come together. And the project focused on preschool. This investment focused on preschool, but as I said earlier, we are a preschool through elementary school model. And so we actually partnered with Loyola Marymount Center for Equity for English Learners on a different project where we studied SEAL implementation in transitional kindergarten through 3rd grade in 4 schools in Los Angeles Unified School District. And so I think we're gonna shift to hearing a little bit about that partnership as well.
Thank you, Anya. So actually now we're going to just take a minute to ask you all to reflect on what's offered within your own state or locality in terms of professional development to supporting for DLLs and what those professional developments might focus on and what might still be needed. So you can write your responses in the chat box as you think about it. And then after that, we're going to watch a short video clip to showcase actually the partnership between Anya's organization and Edvita's organization. So leave that up for just another minute or so. Okay, so I think we can go to the next slide. And this is going to be, we're going to show a video that New America produced in partnership with the folks at SEAL and the folks at Loyola Marymount and actually LA Unified School District to really showcase how the partnership between all these organizations is working to effectively impact professional learning and English learner education in LAUSD. So we can go ahead and play that video.
By talking about its habitat. Everybody say habitat? Habitat. Habitat is where something lives. So the habitat of the oak tree is the temperate forests. When you hear the signal word, you're going to turn to a partner and you're going to tell them where the habitat of the oak tree is. Deciduous. Deciduous. Leaves fall down.
So today in the demo, you saw a variety of different structures and strategies in place. You saw us doing choral response. You saw using lots of think, pair, shares. You saw groups having a chance to put their heads together. If the only times that we're allowing for talk is the teacher talks, then one student raises their hand and they share, we're not going to be providing our English language learners with the many rich opportunities to practice language in the context of our classroom.
Dedicated meteorologist, dedicated meteorologist, dedicated meteorologist, predicting around the city.
Good job.
I like this model because it's very student engaged. Children who are 5, 6 years old or younger, they learn to play. And you hear them using, I'm a meteorologist and I'm forecasting the weather. I hear them doing those things. And I don't think I would be able to do that in a conventional classroom.
With this model, we've seen our kids just blossom in, vocabulary development. Their writing has improved, and we've also been able to reclassify students earlier in the year than in times past.
We're saying that this is about building the capacity of teachers to really understand and have the expertise to support English learners. Meanwhile, it benefits all kids.
It's a very unique partnership with SEAL. We recognize their incredible theoretical and research-based approach both to professional learning and instructional strategies, but also look at professional learning on a long-term basis.
SEAL was very intentional in its design that we weren't going to be a dump and run model of professional development. We find that for teachers, they can hear about strategies endlessly, but to actually see it happening live in action with their kids is what really makes it come alive for them, both in terms of buy-in and in terms of really understanding at a deep level how the strategies support the student.
Great, so now we're going to hear directly from Elvira and Anya about their partnership and the work that we saw in the video.
Thank you, Amaya, and it's always a pleasure to be able to see research-based practices and adult learning in action with the support of teachers of young English learners and dual language learners. We have the honor of being able to collaborate with SEAL, the Sobrato Early Academic Language model, as well as the Los Angeles Unified School District Multicultural and Multilingual Education Division, Wexford Institute, as evaluators of this project in a National Professional Development Grant that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of English Language Acquisition, or OELA. We began this grant effort in 2016, and it's a 5-year grant. What really provides us an opportunity to think about the possibilities of partnerships is that this is an articulated research-based professional learning for early childhood educators, and it's been co-developed. So although our project didn't begin until 2016, we had spent some time thinking about and envisioning how to enact the possibilities of that pre-K through third grade space alignment, and to be able to really affect the system that supports students around it. And so as you can see, these co-developed goals focus on 2 key areas. The first is to be able to hone in on the expected changes in classroom practices or experiences of English learners and dual language learners, as you heard our teachers describe, as you saw exemplified in the video clips. The expectation to implement research-based strategies to improve outcomes for students is focused on responsiveness to who our students are, as well as an affirmation of what they will be able to do in the long term, focused on opportunities to really leverage primary language instruction. We also are committed to being able to document the processes to obtain not just results about the impact, but to uplift the voices of teachers, educators, leaders, and what does it take to enact this deep level systems reform to really be able to affect the knowledge, skills, and systems dispositions to be responsive to the students that we are gifted with in our, especially in this context and in many of our contexts across the nation. To date, we have served over 81 teachers. We have the commitment of site leaders and district leaders at multiple system levels of the system. The schools that we're serving impact high numbers of English learners, 59% English learners, 90% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. On the next slide, you'll see the approach to this project. The fact that the partnership did allow us to attend to all facets of the SEAL implementation model, as you heard Anya describe, particularly in a large urban setting, allowed us to work in collaboration from the university as a Center for Equity for English Learners to the deliverer of a systems level professional learning project, and an opportunity to engage on the ground the leaders within the system in continuing to co-construct and co-create the model as we're implementing, and also being responsive to the educators who are affecting the lives of our students. So what you see in this diagram is the opportunity to really uplift district and site level leadership as a responsive approach to systems level management, inclusive across departmental collaboration. Although LAUSD is a large urban school district, we see similar infrastructures across other districts and know that what it takes to have conversations across cross-departmental collaboration is really critical when we think about systems level change. We know it's critical also for short and long-term planning, as well as sustainability. And a key facet of that is fostering leadership and development of coach facilitators, as well as teacher leaders within that. At the heart of it is also how we interface the development of leaders along with the long-term sustained professional learning that's envisioned and enacted in this model. And Anya will be describing a little bit more of it as we move more into our presentation. But I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Hurwitz. Anya, if there's anything you'd like to add in terms of the possibilities of the partnership within this particular grant.
I'll just add that the ability to both be implementing and working on the ground, and as I said earlier, we take a cross-systems approach, but then to be also deeply partnered with research at this level with the Center for Equity for English Learners and Wexford Institute, as well as the evaluation departments within LAUSD, and really bringing in their own internal systems for looking deeply. That opportunity is so powerful, so that we're both enacting what we're moving towards, which is changing practice in classrooms, but then also able to do this deep analysis of what it takes and how it unpacks an implementation and how it impacts at all levels. So it's really quite an honor and a powerful partnership.
Thank you. And as we move on to the next slide, this really does highlight the key facets of research and evaluation and continuous improvement that were designed for this project. Again, with the focus on being able to really capture what it takes on multiple levels to be able to support and monitor and really capitalize on the potentiality of impact We did design a quasi-experimental design to capture student outcome measures for program participants and non-participants. And as we work through the project, we're also able to work collaboratively as a team to utilize different data points to identify progress benchmark markers and to be responsive to the changing contexts that occur within the organization and across our partnerships. So as we transition to the next portion of our agenda, you'll see how the research-based practices are also manifested in other facets of our partnerships.
So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and start talking about some specific strategies that all of our wonderful presenters are utilizing to affect the education of dual language learners. So Thena, let's start with you. Please tell us about the planned language approach.
So the planned language approach is a comprehensive, systemic, research-based approach that we ensure optimal language for all children. So what that means is really basically it involves making decisions ahead of time to ensure that all of us have a high image of the children's home language. And the next slide, Carola can share more about how it is approached in a system level.
Thank you. So when we're thinking about the planned language approach it takes a lot of planning and a lot of thinking around the kinds of resources the program has, the languages that are present, that the families bring, the educators, and all of it together, then looking at the school readiness goals for dual language learners. What are those going to be? How are they going to be documented? When are they going to be reviewed and shared with families? How the families will be able to provide input? And then what happens on a daily practice? How are the strategies going to fit within that model, language model, within a setting to ensure that children not only have access, but are able to develop domain intrinsic knowledge while they're enhancing the comprehension and development of the home language and English. So for example, with infants and toddlers, what is the infrastructure to support the home language development when you have multiple languages? And like in EduCare, for example, you have most of the families who speak Vietnamese and Spanish, and the teachers who reflect, the educators reflecting the languages of the children. So how in organizing those settings, how are you ensuring that the children have that access while being continuously exposed to English, a little but continuously, to build that foundation in both languages? And when they are coming into the preschool years, then how best to approach this in a specific context. So for example, for EduCare, deciding that English with systematic home language support was the best model. So looking at how to build the infrastructure to support those models that within the agency is all set up and described in their planned language approach. And it includes parent conferences, how we looking at language development, both home language and literacy development separate from English language development. So all of these elements are critical to sustain all of the practices that happen on a daily basis in interacting with children in classrooms.
So this is the coaching slide. So there are about 5 aspects of my role as I see as a coach. So one is that we use this comprehensive support This rubric helps teachers to work together to improve the experiences for families and children in the 3 elements. So like Carola said before, was a family supports, environmental supports, like what in their learning spaces, and then the instructional support, which is the oral learning. And then the second aspect is the reflection. We get together, we reflect, debrief about the anchor text, the strategies on our curriculum, the what's current ideas, what's the situations, and some of our practices. The third is a self-awareness. Exploring with the teaching staff the experiences that's going to influence their attitude and their biases, right? And that's so meaningful. The conversation is very rich. And then the fourth aspect is the stress management. We look at some of the current triggers and healthy ways of coping and being able to practice mindfulness as we uncover some of these curriculum in our classes. And then the fifth is team dynamics. We support each other to grow in interpersonal relationships with our children, our families, our colleagues, administrations, because we really want to promote an environment of equity. Yeah, and so the next slide is documentation. And so we believe that documentation is a way to make learning visible. So it's a way that we grow in our knowledge of the children, the families, and ourselves as educators. So this approach really works because it honors the uniqueness of children rather than learning goals that all children progress at the same time with the same materials. So this for us is also a way for us to create dialogues and support advocacy and engagement for the children and in our education system. So here in the Padlet documentation, the teachers get to post, time observations right away. They get to ask questions. They reflect, and before and after photos, they will be able to really capture some of their learning. And all of this is in line with our 4 core features: the data, the high quality teaching practice, embedded professionalism, and the intensive family engagement. And the next slide, Carola, will you share more about the family supports?
So as we started with family supports, we looked at what are the essentials, right? And looking at the family, the culture and language interview, and teachers meeting with families, not sending something out to be filled out, but actually building a relationship and having a guide to set the questions that are critical for teachers for the educators to have an idea of the language background, how much language exposure in the home language and English each child has, their cultural interests, practices, passions, and also to understand from the family's perspective, what are their hopes and dreams in regards to bilingualism and biliteracy, and what are their concerns, if there are any, so that it starts from the beginning with an understanding that bilingualism is important, and there's a reciprocal engagement between the families and the educators and the program in all trying to work in a positive manner to build the child's exposure to all of these experiences in a way that prepares them for the future as well. And the picture you see here is, how do we ensure that we are explicit about what we mean in around the importance of the home language in development, and also respect, cultural respect and humility. So this is a sign that's in classrooms showing how and saying how important the home language is for the child's well-being and learning.
So we'll be showing a video of family engagement. And so I want to set up the stage a little bit while our video is being loaded up. So the pilot teaching team is first started to attempt to put the portion of the personalized oral language learning strategies on a parent board, because we want to see what kinds of engagement would it promote when we post observations in the 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Vietnamese.
Một quá trình làm thế nào những con giun tơ phát triển cái kén và những con sâu bướm xuất hiện từ đó. Đọc đi, anh Tình đọc đi. Hơn nữa.
Observation
of how nữa trẻ em sẽ có kinh nghiệm thực hành khi cho ăn lá dâu tươi và cách giữ giun tơ nhẹ nhàng. Có rất nhiều cuộc trò chuyện qua lại giữa những người bạn, chia sẻ về những gì họ nhận thấy về sự biến đổi của giun tơ hàng ngày. Chúng tôi giữ dữ liệu kể từ ngày đầu tiên của giun tơ cho đến bây giờ. Chúng tôi vẫn tự hỏi và hào hứng tìm hiểu nó sẽ ra sao sau khi những con sâu bướm xuất hiện từ cái kén. Next, anh Tình.
Try to do it in Spanish.
In Spanish, I can. You can.
Wanted to see the Spanish.
Đọc tiếng Mỹ đi.
Can you do the song?
And he points to the song and chant.
Nghe đi. Please.
And his mom's asking him to share the song for her.
Kìa con bướm vàng, right?
No.
Đúng rồi. Kìa con bướm vàng, kìa con bướm vàng.
No. There was a tiny egg sitting on a leaf. When the egg was hatched, I came on a tiny silkworm. The silkworm looked around. He finds some over a leaf. He chomp and chomp and chomp.
Until he turned.
Something around. What will happen next? I guess we'll find out soon. Look at our tiny silkworm sleeping in his cocoon, snoring, 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 snoring. What will happen next? I guess we'll find out soon.
Good job, bạn Sơn. Nhỏ đi học không ai nói cho mình biết đó.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more also about some dual language strategies to build from that within the Sobrato Early Academic Language model, the SEAL model. So as I said earlier, SEAL, at the core of SEAL is this notion that language development happens in this most rigorous and also joyful and engaging way through thematic learning, deep learning that occurs where the kids really are able for an extended amount of time to engage in topics that are innately curious and engaging. We have a set of high leverage pedagogical practices, and these are research-based practices. They're tried and true practices in many ways. They should be familiar to those of you that have been at this work for some time. And so what's really unique about SEAL is the weaving together of these strategies, the understanding of how they interact with each other, these high leverage pedagogical practices, and how they can build from each other, the intentional ways that we can be planning and supporting student learning, and all of that within enacted through a thematic extended learning experience. So you'll see, I chose a few of these to just talk a little bit about complex academic, and we even say precise, rich, joyful, expressive language. That language can start simple, but it grows in ever more complex and interesting ways. The importance of structured oral interaction. Yes, of course, turn and talk, pair, share is important, but really what does it mean for educators to be doing that in intentional ways with intentional prompts that really structure across the various levels of student-to-student interaction and discourse and discussion, even at the little earliest ages. Authentic writing for purpose. So from the earliest years, students see their words, their voices turn into text with through dictation, but that grows and grows in the connection with their pictures and their drawings. Because the learning is so rich and engaging, because the content is so rich and extended over time, the children have so much to say, so much to share. And so really building that authentic writing for purpose. Dramatic play and inquiry-based learning, again, thematically connected, and you saw that in the video as well that we played earlier. So the play that kids are experiencing is connected, and then the language that they're using is built in the instruction and throughout the classroom and those concepts, and so the teacher can elicit that language and support that language. And this develops through the grade levels in developmentally appropriate ways. So there's a direct connection to this preschool-based dramatic play into what becomes hands-on inquiry-based learning and research centers. So this is an important example for SEAL, how we build pedagogical alignment. And we really pull critical components of early learning into elementary school, and really reiterating the importance of that play-based, like we're really trying this on, we're trying on the experience of being doctors and scientists. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this family partnership, so important, intentional connections, bridging the home and the school, and making sure that we have culturally and linguistically responsive classrooms where kids' families are represented in their cultures and their communities, and an asset-based approach, and where the families engage with the learning of students both in the classroom, and you see a picture here of gallery walks that happen several times throughout the year where parents are welcomed into the classroom, but also in activities that teachers create for the learning to come home. So that homeschool connection is just absolutely essential within SEAL.
Here we share a few of the programs that we have at LMU Center for Equity for English Learners to be able to support early childhood educators. These are accessible to you. The links are live in the materials that you'll be able to access through the link that was posted in our chat. The first I'd like to highlight is a virtual professional learning certificate program. We've had participants from across the nation joining us in this opportunity. You see the 3 courses that are part of the sequence for professional learning. And we bridge the opportunity to really look at how to implement policy to practice. And we also invite educators who represent those in early childhood settings, as well as those who are in transitional kindergarten settings, which, you know, we help to really talk about what is the bridge in articulating curricula and what are the approaches that will help us really design modified curricula for dual language learners in these spaces. We also uplift possibilities of fostering family and community engagement, and at the core, look at how to be responsive in our instructional practices based on formative assessment processes. We invite you to access our open resources. You'll actually see our colleague Carola featured in the resources, where we took the Doing What Works evidence-based practice on dialogic reading, and we adapted a dual language learner lens to that to ensure that we're including practices that are responsive to dual language learners. These are several modules that are available to you, and you heard Carola mention earlier that they are also infused in some of the courses that she offers at her university.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about how all this works through distance learning. So back to Anya.
Great. So within the COVID-19 context, we're working with our partners to adapt our research-based practices to this totally new and unknown context. And we're particularly focused on ensuring this commitment to high-quality practice. So we focus on oral language development, that children need to be using language, and we need to be structuring learning up experiences in the ways that teachers are interacting with children and with the family. I mean, of course, the family component is so critical in these days, to use language, that learning be joyful, that it not be rote and decontextualized little isolated bits of learning, but really joyful learning, and that as you've heard, is related to this thematic learning, deep learning that goes deep into concepts and ideas that kids are innately curious about. So that integration of language and literacy with content. This critical importance of small group instruction, really we see not as much as we would like to see small group instruction that happens in the spring. And so as we move into the new school year, we really focus and are supporting our educator partners to think about what does small group instruction look like in the times that particularly that we have on virtual online. A focus and a commitment to socio-emotional and trauma-informed. We know this time is hard for all of us, and so really understanding how we have to be plugged into the socio-emotional and the trauma-informed instructional practices, and so that's not done in isolation, that's also, again, integrated in the learning experiences of kids. And then again, this family partnership, just absolutely critical that we are building ever more deep partnerships with our families, so creating tools and strategies for this homeschool connection, real activities that support families to be that learning partner with their students and that learning partner with their teachers. And then this idea of regular, we're calling them home visits. Of course, they're not actually in the home, but even if it's via phone, but those touch points. So as you heard Carola talk about that interview and that ongoing conversation, it's not about sending a form home. This has to be an ongoing touch points that are happening regularly so that the educators, the programs, the teachers are really connected with what's happening at home. You'll see, we're going to show you a brief clip where you'll see a team of SEAL preschool teachers from Redwood City who collaborated. And so one of the things when we talk about a systems approach in SEAL, it's building a system of collaboration across teachers, and we have a whole methodology for that. And so these teachers, because they had that system in place, were able in the spring to jump together and create a really coordinated, powerful online Google Classroom and then small group instruction that followed it. That was still focused on their thematic unit, so the content was rich and rigorous. It was focused, you'll see, on the life cycle of the butterfly. They took that online. They're able to focus on the vocabulary, the thematic, engaging curriculum. They were able to work across languages. So this is a dual language program, so they're working across Spanish and English. And the home school connection, you'll see, is quite powerful.
Hola niños y niñas, les saluda la maestra Roxana. Vamos a seguir nosotros enseñándoles sobre los insectos, pero esta semana nos toca enseñarles sobre el ciclo de vida de la mariposa. Vamos a leer todos, ¿ok? La mariposa y otros insectos tienen un ciclo de vida que se llama metamorfosis. Digan conmigo, metamorfosis. Ahora vamos a usar nuestras manos y vamos a decir las sílabas. Metamorfosis. ¿Otra vez? Bueno, metamorfosis. ¿Cuántas sílabas escuchaste? ¿5? Sí, fueron 5 sílabas las que tiene la palabra metamorfosis. Y al final les va a salir una oruguita así como esta, ¿verdad? Trabajen con sus padres para que esta oruguita salga así y tal vez les quede más bonita a ustedes con la ayuda de sus papás. Ahora vamos a cantarle una canción a nuestra oruguita. ¿Ok? ¿Listos? Vamos a cantarlo. Usen sus manos, agarren sus manos, vamos a usar para una oruguita. Una oruga hambrienta yo soy.
Put your thinking cap. Now it's time to think in English. Hello, friends. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I am Indra Hernandez, the teacher who will be presenting this video to you. Let's sing. Who came to school today? Everybody, everybody who came to school today. Everybody.
A butterfly is an insect. It has 6 legs and 4 wings. Can you draw a life cycle of a butterfly? Can you draw eggs, caterpillar, chrysalis, and the butterfly for me? Thank you so much.
Okay, so one of the areas that we focused on once COVID started was adding to the online platform and engaging in specific strategies that fit the support of family childcare providers and teachers who are now engaging with families via their phones, via their FaceTime, Skype, telephone, whatever it might be, or engaging with children directly. So we incorporated the POLE strategies into storybook reading with infants and toddlers, and with preschools. We had additional webinars that were provided, disseminated through and hosted by Early Edge California that are available in English and in Spanish in their website. And we focused a lot on teaching vocabulary that related to emotional health using gestures, movement, chants, and in both languages, and vetted books, children's books. We got them in the mail, we looked at them, which ones would serve well in different activities, and how to take everything apart and do this online. And then looking at what other activities could be done later on with paper baskets from the supermarket, whatever it might be, but focusing on very specific, simple activities that were building curiosity, but related to the topic presented, and focused on the strategy of follow the car from Whitehurst, and with so much evidence, research with families who speak very different languages. So that enhanced the experience of the educator engaging with the children, but building on the family engagement.
Yeah, and I want to give an example of the infant toddlers, for example. So infant toddler, their home language is the foundation, right? So we slowly introduce English. And for example, if a toddler is engaging with light, like you see there's his fingers on the window, and the educator will say, yeah, that's light. And then they'll create key vocabulary words from that. Light, it could be dark, they could dance to it. That will be their intentional message, for example. And through just daily interactions, that we incorporate those vocabularies into their daily lives. And we encourage families to also extend that by going outside, like, oh, look at the light. The daytime, there's sun, and the nighttime, there's moon. Like, what kind of light? So being able to expose in daily moments for infants and toddlers. Yeah, Carola, do you want to add to that piece? One of our audience wants to know more.
How do we extend, right, what we learn, and then provide opportunities for the toddler, for example, to then use that word and not be a matter of responding to our questions. So that is essential to ownership of the language and utilization throughout the day, and providing activities and experiences that facilitate that dialogue amongst children, and them owning the language. And in this case with COVID, when we include other children, maybe of different ages, and how those conversations can, very short-timed with, obviously with infants and toddlers, very important to be short so that they're developmentally appropriate, but that they're engaged and it's purely interaction, and then providing the opportunity then the child to own and lead. And then the focus changes completely because it's where the child shows interest and where the child interest evolves into. So ensuring these elements are always prioritized and guide the focus of the interaction for the educator.
Yeah, what I love about the personalized oral language learning is a system that's already built to help relationships between a child and a teacher and families so that they can relate more effectively with one another, especially even if they don't speak the same language. Yeah, we really believe that learning is holistic. You know, it's a circular, right? It's contextualized and it's not didactic. So that's why conversations are so important.
Mm-hmm.
And
we want children to be conversationalists.
Yeah.
Right, and to engage in dialogue and have their own opinions. And so this is an example of follow the car, so dialogic reading with families and what happens with distance learning.
Mi cuerpo habla. ¿Qué están haciendo los niños? ¡Baila! Abre el libro, abre el libro. 5 dedos en mi mano. ¿Dónde está tu mano? No. ¿Dónde está tu mano? Vamos a contar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 dedos en mi mano. ¿Qué es esto? Bye. En inglés se dice butterfly. En español es mariposa. Sí, mariposa. Mira la mano. Dicen hola. Hola. Bye. Dicen chao. Bye. Chao. Bye. Sí. Toco la cabeza. ¿Dónde está tu cabeza? Cabeza. ¿Dónde está tu cabeza de Ayla? Ahí está tu cabeza. Y a los lados, mis orejas. Sí, un butterfly es mariposa. Sí. Y a los lados, mis orejas. ¿Dónde están tus orejas? Las de mamá. Sí, aquí.
As we prepare to end our session, we just want to be able to highlight from our Center for Equity for English Learners and invite you to visit into Teachers' Voices through our communication series, as well as avail yourself of our Equitable Distance Learning for English Learners design principles to help us think about the intentionality with which you've seen our educators in these fabulous video clips transition and pivot to distance learning spaces.
Thank you so much. Before everyone jumps off Zoom, we really encourage you to give us feedback on today's webinar. We've asked you a couple of questions in the chat box, but also there should be poll questions that are on your screen now. If you could fill those out, we'd really appreciate it. And Amaya, Elvira, Thena, Carola, and Anya, I thought it was awesome. Really informative and interesting, and it was sort of a feeling of hope I got from the webinar. So I really appreciated it, and thank you for all your work pulling it together. Thanks, everyone.